Good morning. Steve Morris here with The End is Far. I've been pondering what this community should be and who should be in it and why you would want to join it. And I thought that it might be useful to go over my career and show you where I've been, where I want to go, and essentially why I need your help and maybe convince you to help me out here. That's both through a subscription and through just general participation. So let's jump right in to my career. I was 24. Yeah, I was 24 when I first started this job back in 1995. And Intersolve was a software development company, and it was my first job in systems engineering. Um, this was my first taste of corporate culture. And like I say, Intersolve was a great place to start. It was a really cool company. A lot of hot young new talent, and when I say hot, I mean I guess there were some pretty women in there, um, but I mean just there was a lot of young smart people who were really motivated to do some great things. Um, my job was first level support for a product called APS, and that was a what we called a case tool, and it allowed developers to create a Windows front end for these old COBOL systems, uh, back from the 70s and 80s that were all character based. So it was all just a bunch of words. There were no pictures or anything like Windows. So you could convert work code that worked for your business into something that was more modern and easy for people to pick up. And later, I was recruited to work on the newly purchased SAP technologies. And SAP is what we call a enterprise resource planner. And what that is that's a computer system that has anything and everything that you need to run a business. And if it doesn't do it, then you can modify it uh, to do what you need it to. Um, Intersolve spent around 18,000 on my training. Um, that was database training, SAP, uh, Unix, and some other courses that I'm not really thinking about right now. But generally, it was all the courses that I needed to take in order to do my job, or most of them, I should say. We were required to do a lot of learning on our own. Um, and my job for the SAP was to perform various basis tasks to help implement SAP. So we weren't live with it yet. They hired me to help get it up and going. And granted, I was not, I wasn't part of the planning at all there. I was, whatever they told me to do, I figured out how to do it. Um, Basis in the SAP world is it's the basis of the system. It's the base of the system. Everything runs basically anything that how you describe this to people who don't understand it. It's the operating systems, it's the databases, it's the rules, it's the networking, it's all the interfaces for the system. Basically, all the technical end of it. So it was a really awesome environment for me because I love complexity, and I took to it pretty quickly. Um, I played a big role in upgrading to the 31H version. So we had to move up to 31H in order to get our software solution implemented. And I begged our CIO to let me do the plan for the upgrade, and he let me. And it was a 6 week project. You know, you just can't. It's not like going in and just applying a patch. It's I don't remember now, but it was probably around 100 patches, and you have to do things in certain order, and different departments had to get pieces done in order for us to move forward. So I planned it all out, and it was a 6 week upgrade, and at some point during the thing, things went really well at first, but then we started running into problems. So certain departments weren't getting information to me that I needed, and the CIO, he was a pretty tough cookie. Um, basically he told me, like, if this upgrade fails, then I was fired. And we got down to the wire. That last weekend before we going live, it did not look like we were going to be going live at 8 a.m. like I said we would. And basically, he told me that, hey, look, you know, you lied to me, and you made me a liar to all these business unit owners. And that's he was pretty upset with me. And I stuck around that whole weekend. I worked that entire weekend. I don't know that I went home. Um, and I don't really know how much I ate, but uh, long story short, we went live at noon on that Monday, and that morning, I mean, he just dropped in my office, or in the data center. I think I was in the data center at the time, and he said, "Pack your stuff, get out of here." And he walked out, and I didn't leave. I I'd spent 6 weeks on this. I was working my ass off, and I wasn't going to let it go until it was done, and I knew it would be done. We were doing data loads, and so basically I was doing a lot of waiting, and I was watching these loads go in. And he didn't come and bother me or anything. And my boss came in, and he's like, "I'm sorry to hear everything and this and that." And I told him, I was like, "Listen, I ain't leaving until this is done." Um, I almost got a tear in my eye thinking about it, because I was I hadn't had much sleep, and I was frustrated, and I really worked my ass off to make this work. And we got everything up and going. I went home and I slept till the evening, and then that night I went out and had drinks with my boss, or my former boss, and he actually let me know that I wasn't fired. He said, had I left um, that morning, and left cleaning everything up to someone else, then I would have been fired. But so that was a good decision on my part. But it turns out that the CIO, he knew that my project plan didn't leave any room for error, and it didn't. I mean, I looked at everything, and I timed everything out, and it was it didn't leave any room for error or problems. And basically, he knew he wasn't really going to fire me. I guess, I don't know. I mean, he may have, really, if especially if I'd left. But um, it was to teach me a lesson, and that is, whenever you're making a project plan, you have to consider that things are not going to go perfect. So you build in the time, and you build in things that are going to lead to your success. So if you think something's going to take a week, then you add 2 days or 3 days or whatever it might be, for problems to occur, and for you to have time to solve those problems. Because, as he put it, I mean, if you tell somebody that it's going to take 10 days and it only takes you 9, you're a hero. But if you tell somebody that it's going to take 7 days and it takes you 7 days and 4 hours, then you're a loser. And so that was a big lesson for me. So I just wanted to throw that in there because it was something that really shaped my career ahead. Um, we worked, a lot of us worked 100-hour weeks on occasion, not every week, but we did, and we did so happily. The management and the culture there made it easy to pull together at critical moments, and the task at hand was always the focus. Um, it was a real cool environment to work in. I really enjoyed uh, working there, and I'm glad it was my start. Um, let's look at some highlights. Something that was kind of cool that the CIO, his name's Greg Gehring, um, he gave me permission to succeed. He said, I can remember him saying something that you don't have permission to fail. Like you're not allowed to. Not say that you won't fail, but it's not something that's on the list of things that you're allowed to do. Um, and what that permission to succeed did was I don't know, it kind of gave me a different view of the universe. Um, it always, what it did is it put the mission at the forefront, not how I was doing things or who I was relying upon, but what's the end result that I need to achieve, and just focus on it. And it really opens up a lot of doors that you're blind to if you don't have that kind of attitude. I learned a lot about databases, the interfaces, logical units of work. That's like a fetch or a read or a update, create, delete, those kinds of things. Those basic functionality that all databases need to do. Um, and it was beginning of my ASAP methodology mastery. And ASAP methodology it's kind of if you're not familiar with like Agile or some of these other methodologies that software developers use to get projects done. ASAP, I think, was born from something that IBM created or modified back in the 70s called Unified Process, and it's a roadmap to get complicated things done. Um, I'll end up going in a lot more into that in another video. And I think it's worth talking about Greg Gehring again. He died in 2001 from a heart attack. Um, he was a he was probably my most important mentor in my career. He had a failure is not an option mentality. I spoke briefly about that, and I and a lot of others remember him as the General Patton of CIOs. He was a tough guy. He was often mean. He was very disagreeable, but he had a lot of charisma. Um, we once joked about, we would march all day and march all night on Rome if Greg needed us to. Um, he came from the banking industry, and he demanded a great deal of surety in making any changes to our systems because, like in the banking industry, they can't be down for 2 seconds, especially uh, uh, not planned. Um, and much of that discipline can be found in me today. So I'm uh, I'm very cautious about making changes to live systems because you're more likely to break something than you are to fix something, especially if you're being uncareful. From there, I went into the consulting world. So Greg, it was kind of another interesting thing was that he knew that I was going to become very valuable because SAP consulting back then was a hot uh, talent um, that people were paying a lot of money for because there were a lot of companies trying to implement it. So he told me, hey, look, give me 15 months and I'll write your ticket. And he did. I have to say, I mean, once we were in a stable situation, He helped me get a job with Deloitte Consulting ICS. ICS was a 600 employee SAP consulting firm. They were purchased by Deloitte and Touche, and they were known for their rapid deployment and deep expertise in SAP technology. So, you know, they were a get in, get it up and running, get people local or full time employees trained on the system, and get out to the next one. And I like that kind of attitude and work environment. Um, it was my first experience as a consultant, and at first I say I took to it quite naturally, but not at first. I was. It took me a little while, but only a few months, I think, with that first client, and then I eased into it. They had this orientation, a 2 week on site orientation that had listening workshops, public speaking, presentations, networking, and other skills useful for consultants. Um, that was probably one of the best 2 weeks of my life, because it really helped me, probably mostly listening, listening to other people, because I was a smart guy, and I thought I knew more than people who didn't have as much experience as me. But it really takes a lot of different people with a lot of different skill sets and experience to make these large changes in these organizations. So that was probably the best thing that I got out of those workshops. Um, my engagements, I worked for Raytheon and Spalding Sporting Goods. Um, at Spalding, or no, at Raytheon, um, this was my first experience to massive resistance due to legacy system creators' loss of influence and importance. So there was a guy who had developed they were doing their accounting on a uh, Excel spreadsheet, and it was the most complicated Excel spreadsheet I had ever seen. It was several hundred megabytes big and or large, and um, it was pretty amazing feat. Um, but it didn't have row level walking, so what that means is that um, if one person was in the program or in that Excel spreadsheet, no one else could work on it at the same time. So you'd have to go in and make your changes, save it, and then let someone else know that they could go in and do their work. So it's not efficient. But this guy, I don't know, I mean, he was close to retirement, and he he threw a lot of monkey wrenches into our efforts, and it was, he we had to have him, because he was a really key player in helping us understand what their business processes were like. But at the same time, he was losing influence and importance, and he was resistant to SAP becoming the new system. So that was I got a lot of experience from that. Um, Deloitte and Touche was my first exposure to the level of performance that could be mustered if you had access to what seemed endless talent and resources. Anything seemed possible. So, and it was really true, because they brought together a lot of bright and talented, motivated people together, and we all had a sense of the same purpose, and we achieved some really, really awesome objectives or results. Um, it was it was a great first consulting experience. Um, I left Deloitte Consulting. I was up in Maryland at the time. I had to come back home. My sister had developed cancer, and I wanted to be home close to her while she was fighting it. So my next engagement was Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. Um, it was kind of wild because we had a successful project, um, but it was canceled right before we were going live because of competing technologies. So there was Lockheed Martin Aeronautics, and then there was Lockheed Martin Corporate, and corporate, was over Lockheed Martin Aeronautics and other divisions, and they were implementing PeopleSoft, and corporate. I don't know exactly what went on there, but corporate basically said that PeopleSoft and SAP were doing the same function, so they were running the PeopleSoft project up in Bethesda, Maryland, and the SAP project down here in Marietta, Georgia. Um, they just canceled it, and what was wild is, it was $260 million down the drain, but I think that was government money, so it wasn't hard for them to swallow. But overall, it was well executed. There were the issues with scope creep. The project manager had been replaced, I don't know how many times in the 9 months I was there. Several times. It was kind of crazy. But we handled it in stride. We kept moving. A very cool thing that I saw there was they had these giant plotting machines. So like rolls of paper that were 10 feet wide, and they mapped every process that they were that Lockheed Aeronautics does onto that thing, and it on its side wrapped around a large conference room, and there are lots of sticky notes on it and notes and all these things. Um, it was really humbling to see how many processes it takes to make a company run, especially something as large as Lockheed. Um, it was a bit of a letdown because we were canceled so close to go live, but it was a great lesson in stakeholder commitment and resistance. I loved working there, and the folks I worked with were pretty awesome. From there, I went to Hewlett Packard, and at Hewlett Packard, I was brought into a maintenance mode kind of a thing. So what they did is they hosted production environments for other companies, and it was my job to make sure that that system was always up and running and stable. Um, so, like I say here, having spent my entire career uh, implementing or getting things up and running, it was pretty interesting to take on a new role that highly restricted change. So I spent most of my time automating tasks, applying change requests, and then validating standard operating procedures. Um, there was a massive culture change once HP and Compaq merged. It was kind of crazy because HP had an open door policy. Like there were no doors on a lot of offices. Not, like conference rooms had doors, but like your manager's office was always open. Um, and then once they merged, then the doors went up. It was culture shock. Um, but I really enjoyed working there. I was there around 3 years, and most of my coworkers and management, um, they were good examples of how good to great author Jim Collins described world class leaders. I'll point out this woman, Renola Wicks, who was my direct manager. She was awesome. She gave all the credit for the team successes to the team and deserving individuals, and then took all the blame for our failures. Like I screwed up a couple times, you know, and what did she do? She covered for me, and then we sat down and we talked about what I did and how not to get back in that situation in the future. Like it was really cool because she couldn't do what we engineers were doing, but what she did is make it possible for us to do our job and not really have to worry about the politics. Like she would take care of all that kind of stuff because there was a lot of politics that go on when you're being paid to host someone else's systems. And I really, really admire her. And whenever I'm in a tricky situation, I often reflect back and, I mean, how would Renoa handle it? Um, she was really, really awesome to work for. Um, but that contract ended, and I went on to a company called Axo Nobel. And yes, that's from like the Nobel Prize type people. They make chemicals and paints and things like that. That's what our division did. Um, Ultimately, we had a successful go live after a few failed attempts. So something that I I want to talk about from that experience was we had, I don't know, there were 7 or 8 business unit representatives in a meeting, and we were talking about going live, and at least 3 business units said no, we can't go live, because these things aren't working. And the project manager, along with the 3 business units that were happy, basically overrode those 3 business units that said, they weren't ready to go. And I'm not going to fault this guy. He just he got thrown into this position without a whole lot of experience. And to me, I likened it to a shuttle launch. And I even talked about this because I was one of the representatives for the business unit, basis, which everything runs on. Um, I likened it to a space shuttle launch, and 3 out of 8 engineers saying, "Hey, look, we got some problems. This launch is gonna fail if we do it now and we don't fix these things." And it failed. And it's hard to try to transition an entire company over to a new live operating system that doesn't work. Um, but we did get it up and going. I mean, we did a lot of finagling. Um, but that was in my, if you're in the SAP world or about SAP, I mean, there's a lot of horror stories with companies like this, and that go live was, for me, it was all the horror stories that you could experience wrapped into one. We used offshore developers that were difficult to communicate with. There was very little communication coming from the top, and like I said, we had an inexperienced project manager who was not familiar with technology. So, um, but again, if you're working in the SAP world, you're definitely working with a lot of smart people, and I mean, I learned a lot from there. From there, I went to Coca-Cola Enterprises, and I was retained to help configure SAP's consider security or authorizations for their Sarbanes-Oxley efforts. So Sarbanes-Oxley is an act, a congressional act that essentially is kind of like it's generally accepted accounting practices for publicly traded companies. So I think Enron and is an example of people not following Sarbanes-Oxley type of stuff. But this is where I'd done SAP security to a degree. I always worked with those teams as a basis person, so I understood the technical aspects of it. But Coca-Cola, it was part of a program called Governance, Risk, and Compliance, and that's a really neat universe. It's its own set of disciplines, and what it is it's governance is uh, things you're allowed to do, things you're not allowed to do. Risk is and reward, so you don't have risk without reward. And then compliance is kind of like your audit. You test to see whether um, you're you're getting the rewards for the risks that you're taking, and that your rules um, are properly being followed. Um, and we created roles, responsibilities, and what was kind of cool was is I learned that if you use rules in a company, you can predictably create desired results. So you don't. What you do is you don't allow certain things that cause problems to happen. Um, and in this role, I gathered requirements. I talked to business unit owners. Um, I recorded use cases. So like step one, step two, step three, step four, and I helped train power users. So that it wasn't always on our team to resolve issues. We could train people in the different business units to handle certain problems. Not all, but there were certain things that they could handle without coming to us. Um, and this was where I was first introduced to the benefits of Toastmasters International. There was a guy that I worked with who was a member, and he was he was a very good speaker. So I eventually ended up doing some Toastmasters for a while. I need to get back into it, but I'm not actively engaged in that organization right now. Um, Coca-Cola Enterprises was an example of a well-oiled machine, and it had a definite culture to go along with it. Its employees and contractors had pride in the company and our work. Um, a sense of common mission was pervasive. It was a really another really incredible company to work for. I have to count myself extremely lucky in my career because I've managed to find my way into some really great companies. Um, Again, this is something that I've figured out, like with Deloitte and Touche, that talented teams can honestly drive a desired result and behaviors, um, given a mission using good requirements, standards, procedures, and rules. Um, if you ever have an opportunity to go to work for Coca-Cola, I would take it. It was a really great place to work. Um, and then I moved on to the Centers for Disease Control. Now, this was this was a great experience and a bad experience at the same time. I was one of the first SAP consultants on the ground for our project. It was called VTrex, Vaccine Tracking System. Um, I worked for the NCIRD. It's something National Center for something respiratory diseases, um, infectious respiratory diseases. I worked with a lot of different organizations. We worked with competitors, and that was to prototype and test an SAP solution to meet the demands of the CDC, which was tracking a lot of money that was going out to the different states and territories of the United States for vaccines. Um, I worked a lot on service level agreements between the CDC and the numerous vendors. Um, and I gained a lot of experience in politics, corporate and government, conflict resolution, commitment building, and again resistance. There's always resistance when you're trying to change the way that people are doing things, even if it's for the better. Um, Today, VTrex is the flagship system for the CDC and paved the way for HANA, which is kind of a big data sort of AI system. They're using that for Ebola and all kinds of other uh, things that they're trying to track and keep up on. Um, while I was at the Centers for Disease Control, I was working for a company called the Bayer Group, and I just want to uh, hats off to them. That was an awesome company. I'm sad I left the way that I did. I was at the CDC for 3 years, and it was it was hard on me because basically it just took us too long to do. We were trying to do everything, And essentially, what I found out with the CDC is that your job is to spend money. And I could still be there. I mean, I could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, um, helping them spend money, but I'm just not that kind of person. Someone I likened it to a cow, turning a big old grain wheel to grind grain every day. And someone that I worked with said, well, that's not for you. You're a racehorse. You need to get in and finish the job and get out and go to the next race. And that suits me better than just going back and doing the same thing every day. um, I ran for Congress. I ran for United States Congress after that, and it really wasn't a serious attempt. I really just wanted to go through the motions and see what it was all about. And one of the things that I got out of this was um, experiencing wicked problems. And I'll talk about wicked problems in another video, but these are problems where you have so many different stakeholders who have different goals that you're never going to solve the problem within itself, because everybody's trying to do something different. Resistance to change again, blindness, not knowing about certain things in the universe, blending. So, blending your ideas into someone else's and blending theirs into yours. Belief systems, things, and belief systems can make you blind to certain things. And a lot of nuances that help people reach shared concerns and commitments. I've dabbled in politics a bunch over the last 10 years, but to tell you the truth, I'm just not built to be a politician. We can go into more than that later. So after I, failed miserably at running for Congress, I laid around for a while. You can see that was pretty much ended in July of 2010. And I really wasn't doing anything until that next August of the next year. What I did was I spent my savings going out to sit on a boat and read books. And I did some odd jobs here and there for money, but this consulting job was my next engagement. And what I was doing is I was working with a chemist that this small business owner that my dad knew, help that chemist get a process going for this guy's contact lens company to print contacts for prosthetic purposes, cosmetic, and then for theatrical. So like, vampire eyes and stuff like that, because it takes a long time to paint contacts, and that's a pretty common thing for people to do. But what this business owner found out was Ciba Vision had discontinued a line of colored contacts. I think it was their first line that they came out with back in the 80s. And there are a lot of people who wanted to keep those same contacts. One of the things that he always talked about was, imagine being this little old lady who had these blue eyes, and you go to church every day, and people expect to see those same eyes. And so there was a lot of people who were willing to pay some good money for these contacts to be reproduced. So I was helping this chemist who helped come up with that technology back in the 80s. And, it was a lot of paperwork. We had to do a lot of FDA quality stuff. I had to create a lot of positions. We had to go through testing these inks, and it was kind of cool because we actually took a bunch of chemicals and put them into test tubes and under UV lights and ice baths and all this stuff to create basically the glue for the pigment. And then we would buy pigment, which was kind of wild. It's the same stuff that they use to color concrete and cosmetics and stuff. But we had to grind it down, um, and blend it with this glue. It's kind of like an epoxy, um, that we would print onto these contacts, and we had to create a system that allowed us to do it over and over and over, and always get the same product. Um, we were able to transition 90% of all their custom contact lens orders from hand painted to printed. Um, helped create a lot of relationships with new vendors and quality standards. Um, we had a problem with comfort. So, this dust that we would use to color the pigment, or color the ink, this epoxy stuff that we would print onto the contact. Um, your eye is able to detect something in it of a certain size. I forgot what it was, so many microns. Um, but our process for grinding that pigment down to something your eye can't detect, it was flawed. And I contacted an ink manufacturer, someone who made ink for like newspapers, and I told him what our problem was, and he said, "Come on down." And I went down there one morning, and he had a bunch of people sit down in their conference room, and we talked about our problems. And the funny thing about printing contacts is there's not very much ink there at all. So like I needed a kilogram of ink per month, um, to be happy. And this guy didn't do anything less than 150 kilograms in a batch. I mean, they made a lot of ink. So he's like, "Listen, we can't do it for you, but walk with this guy, and he's going to show you all the equipment that you need and how to grind this stuff down to however small you want it." And they did it. It was really cool experience, because they didn't want anything. In fact, they gave me some stuff to get started, and I was just I liked it. I'll have to I'll have to I don't remember what company that was, but they this was during the Obama times, and one of the things that this guy said, and he was a small business, relatively small business, um, was that he would do anything to help other small businesses succeed, um, which I just thought was really awesome. Like it wasn't like they took weeks out of their time to help us out, but they took several hours, and I collaborated with them over a period of weeks to help get through some of the problems that I was facing trying to do what they were helping me do. Um, Another thing I did with them was map the company's business functions and related requirements to operate down to each individual department, and transition the tasking for a more efficient execution of the QuickBooks ERP manufacturing module. So, the way that they were doing things was pretty inefficient, and my experience in the SAP world helped change things a little bit, that resolved a lot of issues that they were having. And then ended up leaving there. Um, the owner and I didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things, and it was time for me to go. So the quality manager, I transitioned all my responsibilities over to him, and um, I say he's still running that lab. I think he's got his own company now. The guy who owned the company, um, he passed a few years ago, and pretty much the company died with him not long after. Um, so, this is, I'm not going to call it bullshit, but I've done, a few technical consulting jobs here and there over the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years. Mainly I've just been doing, gig work. Um, back in 2016, I attempted to go back into the SAP world. Went to work for a company called VirtuStream, and what I found out there is I'm just not built to be on the road again, because that's one of the things was is that I was there for a week, and then they sent me to Minneapolis for training, and then they ended up making me the project manager for a big project, giant project that was failing. And basically it turned into, you can work from home, to we need you to be in Minneapolis every week, for a year. And that just now I wasn't going down that road. I've had some family things going on at the time, and it just wasn't for me. And what I really realized is back then, um, I'm just not built for the corporate world anymore. Um, I found my way into woodworking back in February of 2017, and we made custom cabinetry and furniture for high-end commercial sector. So solid wood, stained grain, bars and countertop, shelves, tables, benches, kiosks, cabinets, whatever. Specialty millwork for restaurants. If you've been here in Atlanta, we did Kaiser's Chop House, a bunch of Bar Tacos, Barcelona, Kevin Rathbun Steakhouse, Luke's down in Maitland, Florida, is something I hope to work on. We worked with Walnut, Walnut, Maple, Sapele, Ash, and mostly reclaimed Heart Pine, which is it's hard to work with because it's got so much sap in it, but man, it's beautiful. Um, and with this company, I received goods, material inspections. I did millwork, material enhancement, which I would say, that's adding epoxies or other things to shore up problems in that naturally come in wood. Um, Putting things together, joinery, finishing. Um, I love woodworking, but it's not something that I'm going to be able to retire on. And I've got this thing I call the Innovators Guild, and I'm the chief innovation officer. It's not something that I ever really got off the ground. It is something that I would love to see happen. So the idea is blending arts, crafts, and technology with a small business incubator. And my thought was to have a small business pilot, custom cabinetry and furniture manufacturer, um, that basically blends Fortune 50 technology with old school craftsmanship. I actually attempted this. I had a business called the Cabinetry Guild, and I did everything. I tried to do sales, I tried to do building, and I picked up materials, and basically it's way too much work for one person, and I didn't start out with enough money to hire someone, so that ended up failing. But if you have a wood shop, if you do cabinetry of some sort, and you've wanted to look into using newer technologies, um, connect with me, because I'd love to just talk to you and help you out. If it ends up being something that you can or would want to pay me for, let's explore it. But at first, I would say, heck, let's just talk and see if you're ready to do it, and if you have the time to do it. So right now, um, what am I doing? I'm doing QuickBooks for a buddy of mine who has a small business, a concrete business. I help him demo concrete sometime, and sometimes finish it. And I'm building some kitchen cabinets for a neighbor. So I'm kind of I'm a gig worker. Um, but what I really need to do is I really need to be working on a lot of the problems that we have, going on in the United States, and that's that's kind of the reason that I'm starting this, the Indus Far community. Is I want to help develop solutions for you using all the experience and knowledge that I've gained over my life, um, to come up with new solutions and help implement them. That's, it's one thing about coming up with a new great idea. Um, it's another thing actually getting it into practice, and that's something that I think that I can help with. Is I read a book called The Innovator's Way, and one of the things that they talk about is, um, innovation is not the invention. Innovation is the widespread adoption of the invention, and that's what I think that I can help with. So, it's kind of like General Patton when he talks about, a good plan executed right now is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow. Um, let's come up with some solutions, and they don't have to be perfect, but we've got to start executing them. And that's where I think I can lend a lot of experience and drive towards some solutions that are good for all of us, not just for the ruling class and the people that they convince to, you know let them rule them. So, I hope that was helpful. Yeah, I actually got a lot out of it just talking about my history like that. I'm pretty excited about trying to get this thing going, and I don't know. In my head, I think I can do it. I don't know. I mean, maybe you can tell me, hey, I don't believe you. I don't believe these certain things, and let me try to respond to it and see if we can get past a few hurdles. My plan is, uh, use the methodologies that giant corporations use to implement change in their organizations. Use those same methodologies to implement change in our system of government. So, um, let's explore that, and just remember, we have time because the end is far.